Welcome back, everybody. We are now up to chapter 16, and this is a very exciting chapter, and something different is going to happen in this chapter that hasn't happened before. We've learned 5 metaphor for before the process of creation, we call it before Tzimtzum, and then we learned 5 metaphor for the contraction. We learned 5 metaphor for the logo, which is the source of all the creation that's going to happen, which is the Rishimu, and the 5 metaphor for that, and then 5 metaphor for the kav, the first ruler, the first measuring tool, which establishes beginning, middle, and end, and how much energy is going to there's going to be a beginning point and end point, a giver and a receiver, and we need to measure how much the giver is going to give and how much the receiver is going to receive, and who's going to initiate and how much they're going to initiate. Is the giver going to initiate the transaction, or is it the receiver going to initiate the transaction? How much does the receiver need to initiate? How much the giver needs to initiate? It's like you can, nowadays you can request funds from somebody and they can just send you funds, or you need to give them a QR code before they can send you funds. Whichever way it works, there's always this there's the giver, and then there's a receiver, and there's how much, and then there needs to be a measurement of all of that. And we learned that there's 5 metaphor. Go back to the classes and learn about them. But today's class is very interesting. We're only going to use 1 metaphor, the metaphor of building. That's it. It's really interesting. And straight away, we're going to go to the lesson. And there's a difference between learning metaphor and learning lessons. We've said it many times. Metaphor is called mashal, and we're using our left brain. But when we're learning the nimshal, starts with an N, the nimshal, we are going into the lesson, which is the right brain, requires more intuition, requires more of a soul understanding. However, it has a bigger impact on us when we learn the intuitive part, the second part. Now, let me just bring something up right over here. I have a ruler, and I have something really, really interesting to explain before we start inside. So what we're going to learn in the next few chapters is we're going to learn about the kav, the way this ruler measures things, and we're going to learn about what it creates. The next level is called Adam Kadmon, the character, the first man, the souls of all of man. All of our souls were created in Adam Kadmon. So the way basically it works, it's like very similar to an hourglass. You see, the way the top hourglass, it's a little bit dirty. The top of hourglass is shaped. It's wider on the top and it gets thinner, and then when it fills up the bottom hourglass, so you first becomes thin, and then it becomes wider. As the sand goes down, first it's thin, and then it becomes wider. That's the design of the bottom of the hourglass. So let's take the ruler, the kav, which is the beginning of the process of measurement. But let's say, you always think, okay, so God made a straight kav. No, it's not really like that. It's more like the kav spins around. There's the Rishimu, which is like this point, and the kav spins around in a circle and creates a certain domain. And then once it creates a wide domain, it creates a little more specific domain. Okay, so that's generally what we want, but let's become more specific. And then it makes a smaller circle. And then it goes down and makes a smaller circle and smaller circle, smaller circle. Then when they're ready, in the kav, we decide God basically establishes what he wants, but now it's time to create that, to implement. And when you implement, you actually implement the other way around. In other words, when you brainstorm what you want in the end, first you make a very wide circle. So this is what I want to achieve at the end. Okay, but in order to achieve that, what do we need to do the step? What do we need to, before we get there, what has to be the step before then? And what has to be the step before that? And what has to be the step before that? Till we get to the first step, like the bottom of the top triangle. That's the first step that needs to be done. And that first step that needs to be done, then okay, well, then basically in planning, you're basically working like backwards from the end state. You're going step back to the first action that you're going to take. And then when you start taking action, it's going to be the other way around. The first action that you take is going to be the end one that you planned in the planning stage. So it becomes the opposite. It becomes the opposite when you're creating the bottom triangle. And that's something that we're going to see in the next few chapters. And that's the relationship between the process of Kav, which is like the top, the sand, and Adam Kadmon, the first man, which is like the bottom, which is basically we're building man. We're building what is a man in the programming of man, not the physical man. In the programming of man, what does he need first? What does he need second? What does he need third? Till the end is actually accomplished, which really was the thing that we had in mind at the very beginning. So that's how planning works. And there's really two teams. There's the brainstorming team, and then there is the implementation team. And implementation is very different to brainstorming. So Kav is more like the brainstorming team, and Adam Kadmon, the first man, is the implementation team. Now let's start reading inside. Let's start seeing all of this inside. It's going to be more than one chapter to be able to see this, but this is basically the subconscious of man. We're building the subconscious of man. So let's see it. Okay, v'hine meyata. And now, from this point, yesh lahavin, now we can understand prata inyan hakav, the parts of the kav. In other words, the 5 metaphor was generally to understand what the ruler is all about, but now we're going to start understanding the parts of the kav. How what's the idea of it? Bachut and the string. The string is the idea of beginning, middle, and end. Kav is the idea of a ruler to measure. So, the ruler is really set up, like I said, it has makipim, where the ruler measures out a domain, like the domain upnimim. Then it measures out the pnimi, the inside, which means what we're going to commit to here and now. And it actually changes because the first makif, the first domain, creates something. Okay, we're going to focus on this. That next thing that we're going to focus on becomes a domain in itself, becomes a makif, becomes a makif means to go around in a circle for the next level of pnimi. So that's why we're getting the shape of the top of the hourglass, because we create the first makif, and inside the biggest circle of the hourglass, there's an internal circle. But that internal circle, as you go down, it's a little thinner, and now this is the external circle. In other words, you just imagine the hourglass again. The biggest circle is the makif, and as you go down, as the hourglass gets thinner, the inner circle is now the outer circle, and it becomes the new surrounding makif. It becomes the new domain.
Could you show the hourglass again, please?
Yeah. So again, I'm just holding this with my. Okay, the highest circle of the hourglass, right? As you go down from the top of the hourglass, there's like an inner circle. So there's the outer circle of the hourglass, and right inside that, there's an inner circle. And as you go a stage down, that inner circle, now there's less space. The inner circle is now the outer circle.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait, I don't understand. What do you mean? What do you mean there's an inner circle?
Okay, so let's say you would draw. Let's say I would draw inside the sand, right? The highest circle, like there's a circle on the top.
Wait, you're talking about the sand or the glass?
Well, the sand, it doesn't matter. The sand just shows that it's dynamic, and that's what it really is. But it doesn't matter. Like, let's say it would be full with sand, right? The outer circle of the sand, the highest circle of the sand, right after the outer circle, the particles of sand that are most close to the glass, right at the top, right? The particles of sand. that are most close to the glass at the very top, right? It's a circle,
Okay.
right? They
Yes.
have particles of sand that are inside, that are right next to them, that they're called the inner circle.
So there's the outer circle sand, and the next piece of sand in is the inner. There's another circle of sand, and there's a bunch of circles of sand, right? Smaller and smaller.
Yes, smaller and smaller. You could even
Okay.
color if you want, right?
Right. Kind of
As
like
you
rings in a tree almost. Okay, yeah.
rings in a tree, exactly. That's what we're speaking of. That's how the kav is working. People think the kav is a ruler. No, it works like rings in a tree, but a little different. It works like this shape. Because if you go a step down, right? A step down, there's no room for the outer circle,
Okay.
and there's only space for what was on top, the inner circle,
Okay.
right? So now what
And
was
then
before if the first inner circle now becomes the outer circle for the next plane of sand,
okay.
right? And then as you go further down, the inner circle becomes the outer circle, and there's a new inner circle.
Okay. All the way down as it gets more and more contracted.
As it gets contracted. So that's the planning state.
So
First,
why is the
create,
planning?
so first you create a kav, measures out the biggest circle, and it measures, okay, this is domain, this is the domain of creation. We're not going to do anything outside of this circle when we create the world. This is what we want to do. We're going to focus on this. God could do other things. He could create or any of these what's it called, scientific fiction, science fiction. You create any
So the kav is not really a rule. You're saying it's just a delineation of the outer boundary.
Exactly. So the kav is creating a delineation of we're not going to create science fiction worlds. We're going to create this world. Right?
So is it when we go down to the next level, it's still called the kav? All the way each level, the outer ring is the kav?
The kav is all everything. The kav is the external ring and an internal ring. The kav is just measuring everything out. But in every domain, it needs to measure the outer circle and the inner circle. It needs to measure all the possibilities that could be, and we're going to focus only on within the limits of this circle, of this domain. But and then they decide, well, okay, out of all the possibilities, what do we need to do now? What's the next stage? So that's the inner.
And each stage gets narrower and narrower because in order to bring it down into action, it has to be brought down from the universe, sort of the delineation of the outer edge of the possibilities down and more specific. So the first action is going to be just one dot of sand.
Right.
At the bottom.
At the bottom, right.
Okay. And then, so is there any, this hourglass, is the analogy of the hourglass apply any, the bottom half of it after the contraction, is there any relevance to the bottom half, or you're just bringing this for the example of the top half?
The bottom half is once you've decided everything you're going to do, brainstormed everything, you need to give it to the implementation team. And they're going to take each stage and say, how can we get this done? And that's an opposite sort of process. And it's an opposite process. What needs to happen first, second, third, in order for this process to actually work? So we have the planning stage, and actually it trickles down. Okay, so in order to build this, the implementation guys, which they're just engineers to get it done, they're not deciding what to do. They're just getting it done. For a cohesive, balanced man, what do we need first? We need the man to have a Paseach es yadecha, open up your hand, umasbia, and he fills every living thing with rotzen, with desire. The man has to have some sort of ambition. Without an ambition, there's not going to be anything of a story. There needs to be a rotzen. It needs to be a rotzen. So okay, so that's the man's going to have that. And then, but in order to have an ambition, if it's not an intelligent ambition, he's not going to achieve anything. It's going to be destructive. So he needs to have intelligence. Number two. And of course, they're measuring, everything about the intelligence. Then they're going to say, well, the intelligence, if he just has intelligence and he doesn't move, so he needs to have a motion that's going to get him to move. Because intelligence, you can think from today, tomorrow, and get nothing done. So he needs to have emotion. But if he
emotion as in a feeling, he has that the feeling turns.
Feelings are going to have to move him, because the intellect doesn't move alone.
So that's why if a person sees an injustice, for example, something that's wrong, he will first have an intellectual realization, but then he'll have an emotion, and then he'll take action to right that wrong.
Right. And even before it starts with that, he has to have a desire, a want. He has to have a want for justice. If he doesn't have a want for justice, not even going to pay attention, not even going to think about it. And then he's going to realize, 1 second, this is wrong. And then he's going to have an emotion. And then he's going to say, okay, if I just blurt out, they're going to kick me out of here. How can I have a socially, an effective emotion? So then he has the lower emotions. First, he has to have love, fear, and balance, like chesed, gvura, tiferes, love, fear, love, focus, and tiferes, beauty, balance, right? He has to have those. But then if he just expresses those, it's still nothing's going to get done. He's going to now have to be able to he needs some emotions that are going to move things, and they're going to be effective socially. So that's, you need netzach, winning. He has to have the motion of winning, of hoid, of recognizing truth, sometimes be grateful, and he needs to be able to have yesod, which is synergy, has to work with, has to have the skill of working with others, giving space for others. Otherwise, the injustice is not going to be taken care of. It's not going to be effective. He may scream about the injustice, but that may not be the effective course of action to be able to take care of the injustice. And then he needs malchus. He needs a way to communicate. And then malchus, okay, let's all get this implemented. Let's get it done. And then, only then, is the story of man, the original domain which we had in mind at the very beginning. That's when it gets implemented. So finally, we get the wide ring.
Okay, 1 second. Say the last thing. So the last thing is the implementation. That's malchus, and then finally we get the wide ring. What do you mean the wide ring? Where? The wide ring in the bottom.
Bottom, yes, at the bottom we finally get the wide ring. In other words, the wide ring at the bottom really matches the wide ring at the top.
So we're building until it looks like the original original vision of the plan. But in order to do that, each grain of sand has to come through, and then it gets deposited, and then the rings keep getting bigger and bigger. It's like an inverse of the original plan.
Yes, so, and that's the difference between Igulim and Yosher. If you watch carefully, if you see carefully, you see a straight line of sand coming down. Right. So that's a metaphor. We call the top circle, we call that the circles, and the Igulim, the circles, the circles, which means the circles of desire, and the bottom is Yosher, which means straight, which means let's get this organized in a line. Okay, but then doesn't it make new circles down below? Yeah, it makes new circles in a line. Our production, our process has to be organized in a line, sequential. Because otherwise it's just chaos, and it can't come into action. Right. Okay. Beautiful. The beautiful explain the difference between Igulim and Yosher. Chaos is more Igulim, even though it's not chaos, but it is chaos, because if we don't get anything done after this, it remains in chaos. You know, when you've planned things and you brainstorm, it's all chaos, and then it becomes a little organized. We need to organize it, but then implementation cannot be chaos, really, to do it well. Right, it has to be very organized and in order. In order. If you skip a step, it's not gonna come to fruition. It's not gonna come to reality. The line. Okay. So this is prompting a lot of questions over here. I'm going to ask these questions because I think they're relevant now to this understanding this metaphor. Okay. So one of the questions is, it sounds like 3D printing. Is that an appropriate visualization? And the answer, I would just say that the answer, if I may suggest, is no.
because 3D printing works, I believe, if I understand correctly. It's basically, it's like almost like a old-fashioned, what were those old-fashioned inkjet printers, where like it goes along and it made one very thin line of ink. Then it made another very thin line of ink. And after you're finished, after it did that, let's say 10 times, you ended up having one line of words. So a 3D printer is basically coming down and laying a layer of plastic, one thin layer at a time, one thin, not just thin layer in terms of vertically, but thin layer horizontally. It doesn't come down and lay one layer across the whole thing at one time. It just keeps going back and forth, laying down according to the image this. But it's what you're saying in the analogy of the time clock, the sand clock, is that they all exist at the same time. The entire conception, all those levels are all coexisting at the same time. They're in the top level, they all exist at the same time.
Let me suggest that this is existing in a person's subconscious at the same time. The Gulim and the Yesher are existing in a person's subconscious all at the same time. And it's an internal conflict of a person's desires. And then another part of a person says, 1 second, it's not going to work. Let's be practical.
Because the person is saying it's not practical. Why? Because he sees the Gulim and it's not the circles, it's chaos. He doesn't think it's realistic.
Right. We need to come down into something realistic. It needs to be organized in a line, in a sequential process. There needs to be a pipeline. It's in business. We know this. There's a pipeline. There's a pipeline of people working. And if somebody's late in the pipeline, nobody else can work.
Right.
And it's very expensive, right? When there's a big budget. And if one person gets sick and he doesn't do his job, he can't push the project down the pipeline. It's a disaster. That's why you need a project manager. So important to have a project manager. Because somebody, he needs to figure out how that job gets done. So the next guy has something to do.
Right. The one thing, going back to think more again about this 3D printer suggestion, is perhaps to take it in the software has the conception, and then it's coming through a tiny needle of laying plastic. It's coming through that yasher, the straight point, and then that's laying it down bit by bit into turning it into reality. So it's it's almost like what you're saying here with the time clock. There's in the top level, there's a software design that someone did on a CAD software, an engineering software. He laid out the whole plan. But now for it to become reality, all those electrons that carry all that information have to be narrowed down to one electron to command the nozzle to inject and lay down an exact amount of plastic at an exact time and exact position. And then that starts building it in reality.
Yes, but it's not reality in Adam Kadmon. That's still programming. It's a different type of programming. It's a programming of implementation.
Okay, fine. But it becomes at the next level down. For the next level down, it becomes something for the next level down. And by the way, when you're doing a 3D printed, it has to be in the right order also. You have to lay it, exactly in the right order. So, okay, so what?
3D printing is really a metaphor of the limits why this program is so crucial in the right order.
So tell us again about this Adam Kadmon. So what are you saying, that even though once we got the sand through the piece and now it's coming down?
But now when it's going down, we're not actually making man. We're just planning how man will be in order.
Oh, we're doing a kind of a divine sketch of man. Exactly. From the original, there was the thought, then it became a divine sketching out the details.
Right. We need this, and we need Igulim. We need this dream, that dream, that dream, that dream, that dream. How are we going to get that dream? How are we going to get that dream done? Is the Adam Kadmon.
Okay. So now,
yet actually, there's another stage after that. Then we need to articulate those dreams into the conscious, because it's only subconscious now. The Igulim of the Kav and the Adam Kadmon are like subconscious establishment of all these things. But then a person needs to articulate what did I have in mind, what was I thinking in my subconscious, and that repeats itself. That process repeats itself, but this time it's a conscious process, and that's called Keser, the crown of Atzilus.
Okay. You said before, when I finished speaking, you said it's not something yet, and then, but it was cut out. I couldn't hear what you said because my voice was still carrying through. So what?
Saying that what we're speaking now is that it's only software.
Okay. Okay, so here's the next question. If the outer circle is the limits of what could be, is the inner circle the limit of what cannot be? Or what is the inner circle?
The inner circle is what we're actually going to do next. What we're going to think, what the next domain in all the massive possibilities, what's important to us from all these possibilities? What are we going to choose? When you have a brainstorming session, okay, what's the next thing we're going to choose to focus on? What's the next thing we need?
Okay. And by the way, I think the question says, if the outer circle is the limits of what could be, it's not really the limits of what could be, it's the limits that the creator is setting for the purpose of this.
Yes, for the purpose of the story.
There's an infinite number of other possibilities of what could be.
Right.
Okay, next question. What part of the hourglass are we contemplating to understand the metaphor, the sand or the glass? And I think, what's the role of the glass? And the sand, we clearly understand. The sand has the circles you're talking about. What?
We just held it all together. It's the vessel.
But is the glass exist in the nimshal, or the glass is just?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay, so the answer to the question is the sand is what we're focusing on here. Okay. By the way, just when I ask the questions, if you could just pause a second before answering, because from my end, I don't know what everyone else who's watching here is, but from my end, I just see your lips moving. I don't hear any sound. If you talk while my voice is still broadcasting.
Okay, because it doesn't know to take my voice till the computer doesn't know to take my voice till you stop. Okay.
Next question. So intellectual understanding precedes emotional understanding?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then another question asked was like a CAD printer, and that's what we were talking about. The CAD software is the three-dimensional engineering software that then they have a way of printing it. Okay,
yes,
so
this is like the engineering software before they actually start printing anything.
Okay, we've got the questions done. So continue, please. Do you want the mimer back, or do you want to? Okay.
So now we just explained how the makifim, the external circle, and the pnimim, the internal circle, how they switch place, how the pnimi becomes the next makif.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. I do mean to interrupt, actually, because I just want to clarify this. The kav, we said, is the outer delimitation.
The kav is the measuring.
Sorry, delineation. The kav is the measuring stick, the outer delineation. But what's the chut then?
The chut is to establish a beginning, middle, and end in every single process. In other words, let's say, from the emotion, from the desire, let's say, from the intellect to the emotion, right? One's a giver, the other one's a receiver. How is that process going to happen? Who's going to initiate? How much are going to initiate? So the chut establishes there's a beginning, middle, and end to every story, and the kav measures how much.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just a translation of the word. So you know, the Kabbalistic metaphor, I just translate the words, and that's the metaphor.
The ruler and the string. Okay.
The ruler and the string.
Okay.
Kamesha Kosov Beitz Chaim, like it's written in the Tree of Life. Misabel, so it says over there, Misagal v'chayzer u'misagal. It makes a circle, and then it makes another circle. Get it? That fits the words. Misagal makes a external circle, and then the inner circle becomes the new external circle. Misagal, chayzer, and it repeats, makes another circle. I could explain another place at length. And the first external surrounding wheel Hu nikra tihiratita. This is called the lower purity. And we've heard about the higher purity, and we've actually have heard about the name of lower purity, but now you have a clarity. What is the exact metaphor of the lower purity? Lower high purity, we always said it's like gold. When you mix in any other metal, it immediately changes color. It's not pure. So higher purity, the only thing that exists is God, God in his potential, but God in his light means God in his what he can do. But in the lower purity, already where our it's not it's all the possibilities. So it's like pure. We haven't even set up the programming, but it's already something. It's already possibility of something. So it's not fully pure. It's the lower purity. The first circle is the general conceptual surrounding circle that's going to surround the creation of the four worlds. First one is not considered a creation. First one is considered God's an expression of God's personality, and then God's thoughts, God's speech, God's action. We live in the world of God's action because there's nothing else besides God. We are inside God, B'Shaveh, and this first circle is equally distanced to all the four worlds. Like it says in Eitz Chaim, it's like just beyond all of them. In order to understand this, first we need to preface the general idea of the kav. I know we're going into the details. We need to explain what the ruler does. This ruler, how this ruler is really the potential force, to any branch, any specific transference. Specific transference. Let's go on. Harbe, many transferences that come from it, ad sefer asiya, to the bottom of the creation. Like the Chinese say, everything's masculine, feminine energy. So that's what happens. There's always a give or receive at each level in order to actually build the world. Canal, like we've mentioned above, and this is understood by way of metaphor. We have the first metaphor, and I believe this is it. Regarding this metaphor is going to explain the original thought, that with this original thought, this God looks through the entire creation till the end of generations. So he's also looking through the time till the end of generations. Beskira achas, with one viewing, with one glance. And this is useful because when you pray and all various things are bothering you, but if you get out of that a little bit, realize 1 second, God is looking in the entire creation, everybody's life, every detail in the creation, in nature, in everybody's human story, and he's looking at all of that and all of history in one moment. He just sees it all. So maybe what's happening to me is not that what's significant, but compared to this one vision of everything, it has a secondary importance. And definitely, I should really focus on resolving my issues with God himself, because he definitely has the ability. If he can look at the entire history with just one glance, and everybody's story in one glance, he could definitely solve my problem. Lashon Rambam, and this same idea is in the Rambam, in the Maimonides. Like it says that God God is looking, from knowing himself, he knows all the creations, right? From knowing himself, he knows all the creations. It's like looking inside himself. I saw a question, what happens in Noach generations? Well, that was, well, if you're looking at this level, the first eagle, he sees the generation, and he sees what needs to be done to clean up from the generation. And then that's a lesson for the future generations from the nations, how they should behave. And that he sees it part of the whole story. Avir Advarim, and the explanation of what we're saying, you do it's known. Sheesh besh minei rotzen. That there are two types of wanting. Rotzen echad one is rotzen apashut shebatmus, is Hashem's simple, undivided desire in the essence. Shenichlal batmutze, that it's still part of the essence. Mamish, in actuality. We can't even define it as a thought or a general desire, because it's still part of his essence. So you cannot define and separate it, and you cannot point it out. Even though he decided in himself, he decided how to do a certain kindness, or he thought in himself how to speak or how to think about this thing. So he went down how to do, how to speak, and how to think. So that's thought, speech, and action backwards. How to do, how to speak, and how to think, right? That's Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. So the Asiya is he wants to do. Then the world of Yetzirah, the second world, he's God speaking, and the planning and speaking, and the world of Bria is God thinking. Or to understand something deeper. Or to actually want or take pleasure in something. Even though that we connect this this want to a specific thing. In other words, he knows what he wants, even though it's in the essence, and he knows what he wants, something specific. Aval nishar klal behela matzmuse. However, it still remains in his essence. Vim kein ein ba'edain bechinas klal prat. Therefore, it's not divided in its essence. There's no general and specific. In other words, there's no outer circle, and then there's no parts of that of the inside. Rak kasher lachreizeh oler rotzen zeshuchlat etzlei lovely they maisa. But only when a person decides to take action, but pelmamish, in actuality, then it leaves from his essence and becomes something revealed as Yove Arotzim bebechinas klal prat. Then this want becomes an actual general idea with the parts. That's this general thought that includes all the actions, from the head to tail, from head to end, in one viewing. And then we divide up to various different desires. and every desire, intellect, and emotion, and they come one after the other, the in a chain order. The higher one surrounds the lower one, like it's a wheel inside a wheel. And by the way, the galaxy, he's quoting, the galaxy actually physically ends up being set up this way, like a wheel inside a wheel, like these onion like peels. That's the galaxy, how the world is set up. We peels inside peels, a wheel inside a wheel. And then it's called a rotzen murkav. Murkav means it has a, like a rider, and a rechev is to ride on a horse. So you have the rider and you have the horse. The horse is the vessel. The rider is the one that has the desire. So there's klal prat, and there's general things, and then there's specifics. So we've actually, I have to correct myself. It's not just one metaphor. Yeah, wheels in Ezekiel. The wheels of Ezekiel are explaining are on very much on levels. The wheels of Ezekiel are starting over here in the Kav, and they go throughout the creation and get repeated again in a more specific manner till they are actually physical wheels of our universe, of the orbits. The orbits are really seas that move around like these onion peels, invisible onion peels. They're seas, and that's because that's how it is in concept in the software. So we've actually said a first metaphor. I have to correct myself. We actually said a metaphor, and we just get this clear. What is this metaphor? What are we going to call it? Oh, okay. So what is it? The idea, the first metaphor is how a person, what's the difference? Let's get this really clear. What is the difference between the thoughts and desire before Tzimtzum, and he really decides everything then, and this first circle, which he sees everything, or the entire creation, all of history, in one glance? What's the difference between before Tzimtzum and after Tzimtzum? And he says that's the difference between somebody knowing that he wants something, but he never thought he could do it, and a person that starts to, like, how you have the person that believes in himself, and he says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take action. I'm going to be the entrepreneur. I'm going to take action. What do I need to do? There's parts, there's things, there's a first, second, third. Now, he knew about the first, second, third, but it's like the guy who didn't decide to do anything yet. He didn't decide to take action. That's the difference between, like, Tehira Elah, the higher purity, and this Tira Tata, the lower purity. You still didn't do anything, but now he decided to do something. He's already organized, and it has general ideas, has parts. V'yuven zeh al derech moshel hayudua adam sheretz livnes binyan gadol. Second metaphor, he says, a person who wants to build a big house, according to the desire that he already decided in himself, and he wants to be in a specific way, specifically. This desire that he decided inside him already before, even though it's a measured pleasure, in a specific way, in this way and that way, and automatically it has a certain logic, it has a certain emotion, in a certain measured way. So it's all there. Akol zman hu hashir v'chuchlet shebatzmus edain. But it's still something that he decided in his essence. It's part of himself. Nobody knows about it. He doesn't even know about it himself so much. As if it doesn't exist. Only after time. This thought comes to action. Straight away becomes revealed in him different ways. That he already decided according to taste, in all the parts. It's just at the beginning, it was just like one general picture. The building will look like this and like this. But then it gets divided into specific ones. To every single thing, to the kitchen, to the dining room, to the living room, to the kids' room, to the Vadraga, and it goes in an order and in steps. From the first general idea, he has everything in one glance. To specific desires. That first desire is basically the general rule, the general that's going to power all the desires that branch from it. The fixtures, the wallpaper, the cabinet color, right? These all branch out from it until it comes to a desire and a logic, intellect, which is the last one, at the end of action, when he gets everything done. And what I've said now is understood. It's enough for the understanding person.
There's a question that was asked a little earlier. Then now we got to a period over here. And I'm not sure what if you want to look at the question, it's the second last question. But hasn't that idea of minimizing one's concerns and troubles in light of the infinite vision of the Creator been used to attempt to gain compliance over people with regards to worldly matters? For example, just wear a mask or take a vaccine because your concerns are little compared to the overall situation.
Who's giving me the instructions? Not the other person. That would be abuse, right? The instructions, I am going to go, my problems compared to this bigger picture are less significant, but that specifically allows me to connect with the infinite and to rebuild again, just without the anxiety. And of course, it's going the actions. So I'm just rebuilding again. I'm going through history. What do we hear first? Oh, we heard we had the story of Noah. We had the story. What did that story teach us? Right? We just learned that a person who spills the blood of another person, the blood shall be spilled. And the next one, it says, and you go become fruitful and multiply. And Rashi says, what are these psukim coming together to teach us that a person, first of all, he says that it's a commandment to be fruitful and multiply. The first time when it was said to Adam, it was a blessing. This time it's a commandment to Noah and his children. There's and besides being a commandment, it's brought next to the prohibition of spilling somebody else's blood to teach us that if we're not busy, if a person doesn't busy himself in bringing children into the world, then they are considered as if spilling blood, because that's why the two verses are brought down to each other. So what's happening is that I am going back to the beginning of history, and I'm going in order. And I said, well, what's the first commandment? You know, what are the commandments? And this is from Noah, right? So is anything that's happening nowadays a threat to this idea of spilling blood or not being busy with bringing more children in the world? So obviously this actually strengthens my desire not to comply to things that could bring to a damage to these ideas, because it seems like some people don't understand that God is the creator, and he could just like within a flash, he sees all of the creation, all the creations, all their stories. He can supply everybody with everything. So basically, it's connecting my mind with the possibility of abundance, and therefore, when I recreate my story today, historically, like what happened next, till I'm here in this point in history, till my life in history, I'm getting my priorities straight, and I know who I need to connect to and what I need to do, and not to comply to things that are opposite of that believe in scarcity, destroying mankind, whatever it is. There was another question that I just flashed by and I didn't see it.
The second last question now. It sounds like the idea is understanding oneself within the larger, quote unquote, autobiography that is unfolding.
Right, and we're really just a part of this audio. Our story is significant in the fact that it is expressing a part of the autobiography, and that autobiography is not complete without my story. But I'm not better than anybody else, because everybody else has their story, and their story is also significant, that the entire autobiography of God is not complete till their story is also complete. So I have to have respect for other people's story and my story in order to complete the ultimate respect is for God. So my respect to other human beings is part of the respect for God, but the God's respect, of course, is it's all about that. Respecting another person is just a branch of respecting God. So there can't be a contradiction. I can't respect another person if he's disrespecting the bigger picture. Or that I can't respect that aspect of that person, because that's wrong. Have we answered that? Are there any other questions? Because I'm thinking I need to go to a birthday party, and even though this chapter is so unique that it goes to the nimshal in the middle of the chapter, which hasn't happened yet, by the way, nevertheless, it is a stop, and we can continue the lesson and repeat over these two metaphors. And I'm trying to think as we're speaking, I'm trying to think of how these two metaphors work with each other. And I think just one is just more of an entrepreneurial metaphor, more of an inside the person metaphor. The other one is more of a building house metaphor. Right? I'm just trying to do some misbeinus on what's the difference between the two metaphors. It seems one's just more specifically the specifics of the first metaphor. One's more internal, the other one is more practical. Maybe that's the difference between Igulim and Yosher. I'm not sure. We can discuss this. Maybe that's the case. Okay.
I think that someone asked if it's a metaphorical birthday party, but I assume that you're hoping it's a real birthday party. By the time you get there, at least it should have materialized into a really good birthday party.
Yeah, I need to get there right. I need to go right now.
Okay, so we'll pause, and we're gonna say a few words about the portion of the week.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Chir. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Okay. You want to be in the picture? You want me to just move over time? There you go.